Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Bulletproof Certainty webinar. I'm Dr. Tabor Smith. Thank you all for being here. We actually have hundreds of docs on the line already. Thank you for getting here early. And we have, looks like people coming in by the second. So as you're joining us, I just want to let you know, if you look below the video here and towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Facebook comment section. Please comment or ask questions. I'm going to be monitoring that as we go through the webinar tonight. And so I'll make sure that your questions are answered, that your comments are addressed. And then also you'll see a little button there that says like. It's a Facebook like. Please, everybody loves likes. Just go down there and click that button and give us a lot of likes. And I know you're in for a treat. You're going to love this webinar tonight. As people are still coming in, I'd like to share a little bit of a personal story, one of certainty though, about a doctor, a medical doctor by the chance, but one of where it shows that this doctor had absolute certainty. So a lot of you know my story. You know my son Jaden was born with some heart defects. He's a twin, but he was born with transposition of the great arteries, ventricular septal defect, and pulmonary stenosis, and we didn't know it at the time, of course. We didn't have ultrasounds. He was born with a midwife. He didn't have a pediatrician, and he was born with virtually no symptoms at all, which was absolutely a tribute to innate intelligence, that in its imperfectness, it was perfect. I mean, it was as perfect as it could be. That innate intelligence built this system, how it was to supply blood and oxygen to his body, and so much so that he didn't even show a sign that he had all these heart defects. And so he went through the first 6 months of his life just developing and growing, just like his brother. And so we got to about the 6-month mark, and I noticed that, he didn't have as much energy as his brother. He was a little bit more lethargic. And so 7 months and 8 months, I started to notice that he was developing some purple nail beds, right? So I took a stethoscope, I listened to his heart, I compared it to his brother's, and I could hear a murmur in his. So we contacted a local natural pediatrician, natural as we could find, and we took him to the pediatrician, and he checked him out. He said, yeah, he says, definitely, he's got a murmur. That could be something. It could be nothing. But we need to send him to a cardiologist. And so, of course, I didn't want to just throw him into the medical system. I asked the pediatrician if he would help me to order an outpatient echocardiogram so we could take a look and see what was going on. So we contacted the Woodlands, and we went in for outpatient. And you should see the face on the tech when he saw what he was looking at there on Jaden's heart, and he dropped his wand, his ultrasound wand. He said, I'll be right back. And I guess he contacted the pediatrician or on call or paged him. And that doctor came in with utter certainty. He told me, I'm taking your kid, I'm putting him in an ambulance, and he's going straight downtown to Children's. That's what's going to happen. There was no, I recommend we do this. And after 15 minutes of fighting with him and me being afraid that he was literally going to take my son from me, I talked him into allowing me, since he had never had a symptom in his life, and we drove to the hospital, perfectly fine, allowing me to drive to Children's Hospital downtown in Houston, Texas. And the doctor finally agreed, but he said, I'm calling ahead. We'll have a team ready when you get there. And so that's certainty. When you think of an oncologist, when they give their recommendations that we're starting chemo on Monday, there is no, you should do this, right? And you might say, Tabor, you're comparing, heart surgery to the adjustment. And I say, I absolutely am, because my son Jaden was adjusted 4 minutes after he was born, and he was adjusted regularly through the first 8 months of his life before we even knew that he had a heart condition. So that adjustment that he received at birth very well could have saved his life. And how many babies do you know that live 8 months with transposition of the great arteries and not have symptoms? So what you do, we all know that what we do matters. We see this in our office. We see miracles happen every single day. So why aren't we as certain as that medical doctor, right? Why can't we look at somebody and say, this is what you need, this is what we're going to do? And so my question to you, our guest tonight, Dr. Dan Sullivan, is there science behind what we do? Is there research? And can we be that certain? Dan, I'm gonna just focus that question to you and turn it over to you right now.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that story there. I know probably a little bit more of that story than most. And you're spot on, man. I just, it just hits me. I start getting goosebumps even with that story, to think, the bottom line is that that cardiologist came in and he knew something that, and it wasn't like he's bad or wrong, or he was a caring guy saying, I know something that your kid's life is in danger, and so he was doing his job, but he was certain about what he is. And so often, and kind of the purpose of this webinar and a couple of follow-up videos that you guys are going to see that we've really dived into this thing called certainty, is, to kind of challenge you chiropractors and myself and you, Dr. Tabor, to challenge us to say, are we certain in the times when we need to be certain? Are we telling the truth about chiropractic? See, my biggest thing is this, and I'll, start out of the gate saying this. If you go ask 100 people in your community, go to the local mall, go to the local church, go to the local, football game on Friday, and ask 100 people and just say, what do you think of chiropractic? Random people. What do you think of chiropractic? What do you think of chiropractic? When I say chiropractic, what comes to your mind, right? I can guarantee you over 90 of them out of 100 are going to say one of three things: back, neck, and pain. And then I also say maybe quack, so I would never do that. Or, I mean, if we gotta, they do pinch nerves, like we'd be jumping for joy, but like, oh yeah, we do nerves, right? We do the nervous system. So here's my challenge, right? And it's my catalyzing statement is to say, we need to change the perception of chiropractic worldwide. We have to change what the so I often, so often do this. And I've been speaking lately. I've actually been in 12 cities, 15 talks in the last 4 months to chiropractors and chiropractic students. And really kind of this plea to say the research, I can show you, we'll go through some of that tonight. I could show you the research. The research actually proves that chiropractic and the adjustment, right, and the consequences of subluxation is more detrimental and more influential on I say or consequential to deteriorating the body from the inside out. So the chiropractic adjustment is proven by the best PubMed literature today that it improves, that it's better and more effective at improving visceral systemic physiology than it is at just alleviating back pain, neck pain, or shoulder pain, or some sort of ailment in the neck or back. So we've got a challenge on our hands, and this is where, again, I say maybe the purpose of this webinar is to challenge us all to say we got to collectively get this thing together and say what are your patients hearing when they come in? Dr. Zaino is arguably one of the best in the world at communicating our message, and the question that we constantly talk about is what are they hearing? What are they hearing? What are you telling them? Or how did they get the idea that we're back and neck pain guys? And I get it. We got to meet them where they're at, and they come in with that, and that's fine. But once they get in there, what are we teaching them? And the reality is we're teaching them, we're communicating them, we're educating them on what we know and what we believe about chiropractic. And so, again, the purpose is to say, I want to raise your level of certainty and, more importantly, probably at this point, your understanding of subluxation. And we're going to talk about the spine. We're going to talk about the spine's role in health, which I think where we get wrong right out of the gates in chiropractic college. We never really get taught what the true like what's the purpose of a spine. Because if you know the purpose of the spine, just like I taught a bunch of medical doctors last month, if you know the purpose of a spine, then if the spine is if you have abnormal spinal biomechanics or poor spinal health, that how that literally deteriorates the body. And I'm going to tell you right now, the best, like I said, PubMed gold standard literature, the same literature that your cardiologist, the pediatric cardiologist, Tabor, that you went to, that same the same resources, literature, gold standard of care that he provides is based on this PubMed literature. Well, I'm telling you, in our culture today, the PubMed literature backs up the fact that chiropractic is, again, more proven for visceral systemic physiology than it is for just musculoskeletal back pain. So we need to wrap our heads around that and ultimately be proud and be excited and be passionate about teaching our patients. And so we're going to dive into some of that tonight.
Awesome, man. So let's hit the skeptics head on. I know a lot of people out there, we get this feedback, your social media, you're not only online, but really in real life, there's people out there that they're almost certain, against chiropractic. So, do you address that? How do we address that? Do we need to?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is, and this is just fresh off the, and I think Dr. Nick is on the line. He told me he's going to be, here listening on the webinar, and because I told him to get on, I was going to ask him if I could talk about this. So I just saw a testimony from his office today, literally today, and the testimony was basically a guy that, came in. I wasn't sleeping. He said I had back pain. I'd been recently diagnosed with dermatitis, and he was just, his health was going downhill, prescribed a bunch of, drugs and steroids. bought a new bed, hoping the pain would go. I mean, everything we see, right? We need to lose weight, the whole thing. So he walks into Dr. Nick's office, and Dr. Nick obviously educates him on the power of chiropractic. Now, here was the interesting thing in this guy's testimony. Listen to what he said. Listen to this testimony. And I maybe challenge you as a chiropractor to say, would you be able to capture this guy's, mind, right? So he said, Dr. Nick adjusts his focus, his clinical focus on the patient. It's very needs driven to the patient. And he went through and basically said, after 3 months of care, like, life has changed, off all the drugs, dermatitis is better, can sleep, no more pain. I mean, like, the typical thing, like, it's so crazy because we see this all day, every day. I mean, you guys all can relate. But think about that, dermatitis. If you take the average person and say, how does dermatitis relate to the spine? Well, it has everything to do with the spine. And I want to, again, help to show you why that is and why some of the evidence. There was a great study out of 2004 that showed the direct link of thoracic misalignment and its effect on atopic disease, and one of them dermatitis. But here was his, I tend to get off on tangents, Tabor. I'll stay on track here.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Here's what he said. He said, Dr. Nick, provides all the patient needs, but he even provided me with empirical information backing up his chiropractic claims. And I noticed that statement, and I thought, you know what? To me, that sounds like a grade 1 analytical, right? Like, I had messaged Nick, and I'm like, listen, man, I read that testimony, and what was more powerful to me wasn't what his results were, but how you actually got him to probably convert as a patient in your office. Because when he says he even met my empirical needs, it tells me this guy probably had a lot of challenges with chiropractic and was a huge skeptic, I'm sure, of chiropractic. Well, guess what? Turns out, Dr. Nick told me that he's one of the head executives at one of the largest branches of the hospital organizations in Northwest Ohio. So you think about this. So he walks into this office. The question is, would you be certain enough to either walk this guy through a path, and maybe he has questions? The biggest challenge, I said this on today, the biggest problem that chiropractors, the biggest mistake I see us making when somebody says, do you have research, is that we change, like, our physiology changes. When I hear that question, and I want all of you to be able to hear that question tomorrow, next week, whenever it comes, and you love it. You love it. You literally walk and say, thank you for asking. One of mine was like, I have a whole, I used to have a pallet that I could drop off at your front step of all the data, but now I can put it on a thumb drive. So I'm here to say there's so much, and I thank you for asking that, because that's one of the problems that our profession has gotten into this. Oh, just believe me because I'm right, or believe me because my philosophy. Listen, I'm a Reggie Gold fanatic. I'm a Sigafus fanatic. I'm a Fred Bartz fanatic. But the thing is, right, that today's language is science. Whether we want to like it or not, we have to embrace it. And so you get people like that's to me how we truly change things. Are you able to do that and overcome that number one mistake and just kind of on your back heels say, no, go right at it, right? And then when you're willing to go right at it, guess what happens? You don't even get those questions, right? You don't even ever get those. So I want to provide, I got so much evidence and so much, PubMed research and anything, and we're going to get into that, as we go here. But I did get another post, and I want to thank Dr. Nick for letting me share that. I just thought, Dr. Nick, and he's a new doctor. He's a year out of school, but I've been in seminars and trainings with Dr. Nick. I've gotten to know him really well, and he's done his homework, and so there's no question. And I said, man, I just appreciate the work you're doing. He goes, that's fun. He goes, I should be thanking you because I actually gave him your 5 studies. He goes, that's what I use, is I gave him your 5 studies off your website. That's how that's how I won him over. And so ultimately, it takes that level of certainty, and it comes from the inside. So I had another guy that posted this is about 6 months ago. He says, remember, if chiropractors had proof that what they did worked, they would tell people. They don't, so they won't. And so I went on to just, I usually don't comment. I try not to, get to it, but I wanted to just destroy this guy because I knew other people were watching that. So I wanted to just, in front of him to say, listen, based on what grounds, buddy? Like, based on what grounds? So and I did it in a more of a pleasant manner, but the bottom line is we have the evidence. Back to your main question, we have the evidence. We have all the research that we need, but it's not one study, Tabor. This is what we need to know. It's not one study. We can't, say we don't need more research, or we do need more research, or we don't. Listen, we got enough science as there is today. The same science as to why that cardiologist said, and even if he said, look what else it was affecting with your son. It was affecting his energy levels. It was, long term that would get, not rocket science, that would probably end up with diabetes, insulin resistant. You can name it, and you wouldn't even shake a stick. You say, do you have the evidence to show that condition can cause diabetes? You're like, I don't need the research to show that condition. It's his heart and his lungs and his whole vascular system. It can literally come. And so that's what we're dealing with. When you understand the science of the nervous system and the spine, it makes so much sense why then we can make these clear claims. And I'm not saying we cure anything or heal anything by any stretch, but why everybody needs to be evaluated for subluxation, and we have evidence to support that.
Well, I think you're spot on. And I also think it's important to note that being certain in what you do, it's not just about chiropractic. It's not just a chiropractic thing. I study successful people, business owners, entrepreneurs, people, millionaires, billionaires. And in order for them to achieve success, they have to be certain in what they do. So as a chiropractor, we have to be certain in what we do. And I think the first step is to, number one, allow us to be certain. But then number two, when you look at why is a medical doctor certain? Well, it's probably not because of their experience. In some cases it may, but right out of school, they could be certain because they've seen research on what they're about to do, because there's science, they know the science of what they do. And so as chiropractors, when we begin to really harness and learn the science behind the nervous system, the research that's already out there, then we become more certain, then we grow our business. And that means we reach more people. And that means it's one of the most important things that we can do is spend time and invest energy into growing our certainty and our certainty levels.
Yeah, I would say an amen to that. Yeah, no question about that.
So I think another part of certainty, and one way we grow certainty is like we mentioned before, through experience. I know for myself, when I was a teenager, I had severe low back pain. And to a lot of people, low back pain was quote unquote normal. You take over the counter medications, but it became severe. It became debilitating. I couldn't walk. My parents would have to lift my legs up and put them in bed for me. And I was on every muscle relaxer and pain pill and anti-inflammatory you could think of. I went to the emergency room. I got all the tests, and there was no help. There was no relief until chiropractic, which absolutely changed my life. And I realized, who wouldn't want to be a chiropractor? Why would anybody want to be anything else than a chiropractor when you give somebody their life back? So that was an experience that I had. But a lot of chiropractors today, my wife, Gina, she's a chiropractor now, and she never even got adjusted before she went to chiropractic school. She saw chiropractic work, with somebody, a friend or a relative, but she never even got adjusted. So there's a lot of people out there that, if you haven't seen it yet, or you haven't had these experiences, you have to rely on that research and that science to build your certainty. Am I right there, Dr. Solon?
Well, listen, I had a conversation with, Dr. Z the other day, or not the other day. This was about a year ago with Dr. Zano. And he was one of those who's like, listen, we don't need more research. We don't need more science. Chiropractors. I said, Chris, you don't, because listen, you were going to die, and then you got chiropractic, and then you didn't die. It's that simple. Like, you were going to die from IBS, then you got adjusted, and your life changed, and then you didn't die. Like, you were headed downhill. So you don't need to go in and see really any evidence to support your belief system that leads to your certainty, so that you can preach this across your community and make sure your patients understand it. So unfortunately, like your wife, it's I speak to the 8th quarter students every quarter. I speak to the 8th quarter students, and I'm telling you right now, it's the same way. A lot of them got into school because, they saw Dr. John, Dr. Smith, Dr. Becky, these people in their community that thought, they were a chiropractor. They look like they have a great lifestyle. They got a nice house. They got a nice family. They don't do drugs. They use their hands. They may be an athlete. And, so then they get to school, and then the school is expected to take them into a new paradigm. And I'm telling you, regardless, it isn't the school's fault necessarily, because I'm pretty close with Dr. Reekman, and I tell him, constantly, I'm like, listen, I get the standards that are on the schools. There's certain things that the schools can't control because they have. So the question is, how did we get in this mess? And this is the thing I'm just convicted of. So listen to me, chiropractors. So if we got a whole mess out there, meaning more and more students going into school, never been adjusted, don't have any belief system. So then they're going to tell me, right? You're going to tell me that you're going to discount the power of our profession, or the power of chiropractic, or the history, or the philosophy, or the real principles that you're going to tell me. You're going you're going to tell me it's not that, accurate because it's unfounded and you can discount it on the grounds of science. And that right there, I will not stand for. I'll fight, because that's just not true. We're just not presented, in my opinion, we're just not presented it in a way that we can see that the science actually backs up what we do and what happens underneath our hands with the chiropractic adjustment. And the best science in the world, I'm telling you, look, you look back to the flu pandemic, the flu pandemic back in 1918, like I speak about this because Dr. Murphy speaks about this, and it just hit me in a certain way when I heard this for the first time. If you go to the history books, why was there no lyceum in 1920? The Palmer homecoming, there was no Palmer homecoming in 1920 because there wasn't a space big enough to house it. 1921, there was over 8,000 people. That's when he put up the tent. Why was everybody flocking to Davenport, Iowa to learn, to understand, and actually experience this thing called chiropractic in the early late 1918, 1920, and 21? Why was that happening? It wasn't for back and neck pain. It was after the flu pandemic. The flu pandemic happened. The 20 million people died worldwide. 500,000 Americans died. Most died in the first 6 weeks. In Davenport, Iowa, 50 medical doctors treated 4,900 cases of the flu with 274 deaths. At the same town, same city, 150 chiropractors and chiropractic students treated 1,600 cases of the flu with only 1 death. They showed through historical standards that out of 10,000 people treated from the flu medically, 925 died. Out of 10,000 treated chiropractically that got spinal adjustive care, only 25 died. 1/40th the death rate. They showed that we had 1/40th. People under chiropractic care had 1/40th the death rate. That put chiropractic on the map. It wasn't bad backs. It wasn't bad necks. It wasn't low back pain. It was you didn't die from the flu. So the question is, how did we get where we're at now, right? And we could blame a lot of things, right? But the bottom line is, it was our problem that got into this. So it's our problem that we can get out of this. We are the solution. And I'm just convinced, and I'm going to keep telling it, and I'm going to tell it, I'm going to tell it, I'm going to tell it. And nobody can refute it on the grounds of evidence and science. And unfortunately, we're just not taught this in school. And I just get, and I apologize for spitting at my computer and for getting all fired up about this, but this is just kind of the way I roll. I look at that history and you're like, man, that's why people went to jail. They didn't go to jail because they wanted to, more people, alleviated from low back pain. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a good, noble cause. But you guys have to agree there's more to the story. And I want you certain and convicted so you feel proud about going into your community, in your office, and you teach this thing that you allow. When you remove interference for the power of chiropractic adjustment, you allow that healing from the inside out to be expressed. And what happens? Well, we change epigenetic expression. You change neurodegeneration. You help reverse and or stop neurodegeneration. You actually boost immunity significantly without dangerous side effects. You actually are 5 times better than the best thing medicine has to offer with drugs, right? For pain. You actually help anti-aging. You increase the telomeres, all this stuff. Right, all this stuff. So now I've kind of hopefully got your attention. Like, all those things are proven things that happen with an adjustment, and we have the science to prove it. And ultimately, in these next, half an hour, next 2 videos that are coming at you, that's what we do, and that's what we're going to go over. So,
awesome, man. And I just want to reiterate that the history, the flu pandemic, that's not debatable. That's historical facts documented, and it's not something that is in theory. And so moving into that tangible evidence, and we talk a lot about research, we talk a lot about articles we have already. Share with us, is there a study, is there research that we can fall back on, our bread and butter, that we can say, look, here's this is what supports us. Share with us something.
Well, the one that comes to mind, the one that I remember even in college, in chiropractic college, really learning about probably first was the Renser autopsies. You remember learning about those? Mm-hmm. And those were good. I mean, back in 1921 Medical Times, it was published. Henry Renser was trying to disprove chiropractic, and in the midst of that, proved chiropractic's effect on visceral physiology because of how the spines that he dissected and the cadavers he worked with, how there was misalignment in the areas where they had diseased organs that they had died from. But the one that the one that often, this doesn't get talked about a lot in chiropractic circles or even chiropractic colleges, who is a lot of it is because he wasn't a chiropractor, and he actually embraced the osteopathic profession more than the chiropractic profession because he just didn't know. Here's what happened. So, and I consider this guy, because I've heard of him in this light, as the godfather of spinal adjusting, because he set the proof. Here's what happened. So here's a guy in his 40s. His health was going down, and he got adjusted by a osteopath. And the story goes where he got adjusted, and he immediately, like, he hadn't run. He said, like, the way his story goes, like, he hadn't run in years. And this was in his 40s, which would have been, I believe, in the 1950s or 60s. And so he gets adjusted, and he goes for a jog. And in the middle of that jog, he feels the need to, like, stand up straight. So he goes up against a tree and puts his back up against a tree, and he hears all these adhesions, like, popping, right? Making noise, these adhesions in his spine. And all of a sudden he realized, man, I can breathe again. And then he goes on to say, like then his vision got better. And it was kind of, odd, but it makes sense from an autonomic standpoint, the ANS, that he no longer needed sunglasses, because he said his eyes could focus and concentrate underneath sunlight. So he goes on, and here's why this guy, I like his thinking, because my thinking is probably more analytical than most. This was a PhD. So he then set his life's purpose to figure out what happened to him. What happened? And then he obviously continued, and like his health took a different turn. He lived all the way into, I think he died 2004 in his mid 90s. And that's Irvin Kaur is his name, Irvin Kaur. Some of us have heard of Kaur, Dr. Irvin Kaur. And he was a PhD, he wasn't a chiropractor, wasn't an osteopath, but he literally spent 5 decades proving the spine's link to autonomic function. The spine's linked to organ function. And so one of his most important and popular papers, and this is the one that I use this. I mean, I use this in that studies that I put out on my website, because that was the first one I wanted to put out, because I don't think it's well known, but number 2, it was one that I just love being irrefutable. So here's this PhD. He put out a study out of PubMed, and it was called the spinal cord as the organizer of disease processes. So Irvin Kaur, you can look it up. The spinal cord as organizers of disease processes. And he just goes through and it validates how the spine's direct control over the autonomic nervous system and its effect on, again, visceral physiology. So that's one I just, out of the gates, and ironically, again, I love to tell a story. He was one of the only, I believe he's still to this day, the only doctor of any kind his eulogy was published in PubMed. They actually, because he had so many papers that he had written and studied and put together on the spine and its role in visceral health, that they publish. You can actually look it up. I mean, you could Google it, Irvin Kaur eulogy PubMed, and it'll come up and you can read it. It's amazing. That's where I read the story. It's a crazy story. But guys, this is where you look at it and you're like, why didn't we hear this on day 1 at chiropractic college? Like, the bottom line is we all get great results in our offices. The bottom line is when you adjust somebody, amazing things happen. One of the reasons I created that poster that I created, The Power of Chiropractic Adjustment and the Science and Neurology behind it, the reason I created it is because the one of the issues we have is that the majority that happens beneficially underneath our hands after an adjustment's made, because we don't heal, you're not the healer, you just remove interference. When that interference is removed, the majority of that happens, the benefits that happen are autonomic. So that means they're what? Asymptomatic. And it's one of the biggest difficulties we have in chiropractic is explaining the unseen and the unfelt. But I'm telling you, and this is why I'm so passionate about this, it's proven though. It's proven. And I'd say this, just like, and I would tell patients, listen, one of the worst conditions you could ever have is cancer. We know that, right? So can somebody get one of the worst conditions, even let's say if it's a death sentence, right? It's the worst cancer ever seen and your death sentence a week away. You literally could be unfelt a month prior to that or 6 months prior to that, right? So that means the worst thing in the world, right? One of the worst conditions, one of the worst diagnoses you could ever get in the world could be asymptomatic. So why didn't it make sense that one of the greatest things you can do for your health is also asymptomatic? Like, just understand, that's physiology 101. The majority, more majority that goes on, you don't feel. So that's where I get in here and I say, okay, we got to be better at communicating this. But to that point though, Tabor, here's the deal. You're sitting here on this webinar, you're like, I like this or that, but we want to get it in your physiology. That's the purpose of this. Like, get it into you, because right now you have to be, this isn't a better script. This isn't about better words that are coming out of your mouth. This is about you becoming really owning this. So what, they always say, some of those greats say, when I cut you open, does chiropractic come out? Are you in chiropractic, or is chiropractic in you? Right? So what comes out? Are you just trying to get certainty, or certainty in you? Because when certainty's in you, it just comes out of you. And that's what we want to try to get constantly put into you with this information.
Absolutely. And I think the more you listening to this webinar right now, you listening to Dr. Dan go through the science of the research, the more you put it in, the more certainty will come out. And so it's not even a educated thought. I mean, yes, we have to allow ourselves to be certain, and we work on our certainty, but it's just about putting and feeding that inside and allowing that subconscious to become more certain. And then we all of a sudden we start acting more certain. We start giving care plans that have more certainty in them. People start signing up, more, our percentages go up. And so Dr. Dan, as we kind of move towards the end, I want to kind of address the perspective from patients, and how obviously if we're more certain, patients are going to give us less challenges just because you're certain. But when you do get challenge or perspective, you try to help the patient perspective. What kind of research do you use? Research? Do you hand them research? What kind of things do we say? How do we share the science with our patients? Touch on that for a second. Yeah,
I think, for me, I always want to make sure a patient knows from the get-go. This is why hand education is so important. And I'm going to take a kind of a side. I'll make sure I answer that question, Tabor, because I want to just hit me something. You may be, and you may say, and some of you are sitting there, you're like, you know what, I kind of like that. I mean, this makes sense. I'm pretty passionate. Like I'm willing to get in front of anyone, anytime, anywhere, and teach them that, I got, I don't know if my story is a little bit different. I've got brothers and medical doctors. I got a mom's nurse for 30 years. My sister's an occupational therapist. So I grew up in a medical model more than, arguably anyone out there. And so I've kind of always carried this challenge of prove it. And that's what's led me down my path of spending thousands and thousands of dollars and getting in front. People say, what research, do you like sitting in front of? I don't like sitting in front of reading any research. I like getting in front of the right people, so that I can hear the right stuff and then make it applicable to the patient. So what you just said, Tabor, it makes no sense to me to have all this great research, but then not be able to simplify it down into the patient's terms so they can get it. Just like this Ed with Dr. Goen, what he talked about, he made it make sense to this major player and what he said is like he's looking at getting a lunch and learn in one of the biggest hospitals and organizations. Like that's what puts chiropractic on the map, that we're willingness and our boldness to go in there. So back to the thing, you may be like a guy that's, I'm in a pain-based office. I do maybe like a physical med type office, like everything's pain-based. And listen, what I want to just, even with you, any of you, anybody, you may be the rightest, straightest, hate straight chiropractor out there. It doesn't matter. We all have patients that we need to relate to, and we need to get this info to, and we have a world out there. We always say we want so much more market share, whether it's 1%, 2%, 5%. The bottom line is we can't get market share if they just still think we're back in neck pain. So the only way we're going to get increased market share is they're coming for the right reasons. That requires us to educate them. And so you may be, Reggie Gold always used to use the blender. If you get a blender, and you realize, for instance, do this, like you got a Vitamix. So you get a Vitamix, and right now, it's all you thought you've paid $500, you got a Vitamix, and you think it does smoothies. So that's all you kind of use it for. So $500, and it's probably valuable just for that, helps you. But then someone teaches you, what, you can also make soups with it. And you can make applesauce, and you can make baby food. And let me show you, you actually can make juice with it. And you also can make this, like my wife did over 4th of July. She put these, different fruits in it. And then she made those popsicles that you used to have that had all the different colors. But she just did those with fruit, and then she froze them. Like we did that with the Vitamix. So point is, like it's the same Vitamix that maybe I was just sold as a smoothie. So my point is, your patient may just know at this point that it's just like they came in for their low back pain. But I'm telling you right now, they would want to know the investment that they've made in getting adjusted in your office. It ain't going to change your adjustment, right? It's going to change your education, because like I said, the majority of it goes unfelt. So it's our job to make sure they know, like they would want to know their investment. So they're paying $50, $60, $70, $80 adjustment, whatever it may be. Man, wouldn't you want to know, Mark, Susie, wouldn't you want to know how much more valuable you're getting out of that adjustment than just what you think you're getting based on how you feel?
Right.
So that's the certainty that I want to help you, because then that increases your value. Because at the end of the day, we all want increased collections. We all want increased conversions. We all want to increase profit, revenue, and retention. And my biggest, right now in my life, my biggest thing is I want chiropractors to have more influence. Have more influence in your town. If you're struggling and you're surviving and you can't make any money, like, your influence has gone down. I want your influence to be up, because when your conversions are up, when your new patient acquisition is up, when your certainty is up to convert them, your influence goes up, and ultimately everything rises. So that's why this is just as much getting certain, and bulletproofing your certainty is just as much of a good business decision as it is, watching your, profit and loss statements. I'm telling you right now, this certainty in chiropractic is everything. And so that's where we want to continue to drive it home and drive it home and drive it home. So
absolutely.
I don't even think I answered the question. So when someone comes in, I don't necessarily, again, this goes back to, got to figure out where someone's at. I'm willing at any time, like, I make sure they know the best research in the world. Like, on a day one, like when I'm explaining the spine, right? When I say spine, like, follow me. This is so vital, right? Let me give you your money's worth right now in the next 3 minutes. If you don't hear anything else in the webinar, this right here, start changing your verbiage to this. When you explain the spine and somebody comes in on day one, I don't care if you've got a poster, if you've got a spine, whatever it is you have. So I'm going to do with you, Tabor. Tabor, listen, the best research in the world shows that, most people assume that a spine just is this hard set of bones. There's 24 of them surround and protect this soft nerve tissue. So that alone is pretty important, because it's hard bones and there's soft nerves that run your life in there. We know the brain runs the body, right? So that's important. However, here's what almost nobody knows, including spinal surgeons and including some of the greatest minds and thinkers today. They don't know that this spine, what we know, the best research in the world, that there's all this little neurology around the spine. So in all your discs, all your ligaments, all your muscles, and ultimately in and around everything that makes those bones allowed to move. That neurology that's populated in and along the spine, it's the spinal health, the health of your spine, the way that spine is moving and the way it's aligned, dictates how well that neurology is going to tell the brain how to work it. And this is what we know. Some of the greatest evidence shows that the spine is the actual motor to the brain, because of all the neurology that's in there. The spine, we know, it's a study that shows that 90% of the nutrition to the brain comes from movement in the spine. So Tabor, if you're, people ask me, Doc, you just tell me that spine is so important because you're a chiropractor and you work with the spine. And my answer is no. Listen, if all your neurology was in your arm, that's where I'd look. I would address your arm. I would adjust your arm. In fact, I wouldn't even look at your spine. If all the neurology that runs the motor to the brain and all the nerves go through there, and if that's where it was, I would look there. But that's not where it is. It's in your spine. That's the way God made us. That's the way we are wired. So this spine, not only do we need to know the alignment and the movement, but because it dictates all the information and nutrition to the brain that allows the body to control itself, if there's any alteration, in the spine, what we call vertebral subluxation, it literally destroys the body from the inside out. All the organs are affected, not just because there's a pressure on a nerve coming out of the spine, but because of that abnormal movement, it creates what we call interference in these little neurons. So as a chiropractor, now I'll get back to the chiropractic part. As a chiropractor, we got to know this spine is more of an organ. I mean, most chiropractors don't know this. I'm huge on this. The spine is more of a neurospinal organ. There's a lot of people that call it that, and they're dead on. The spine is not just this hard set of bones that hold us up straight and surround and protect nerve tissue. It's not the case. The spine is like an organ, right? In fact, it's the most important organ, right? It's not been taught this, because all those mechanoreceptors, and where are the most of them located? Upper cervical spine, right? When BJ was doing upper cervical, why does upper cervical get great results? Because all the neurology is up there. 242 mechanoreceptors per gram of tissue compared to 1.4 mechanoreceptors per gram of tissue in the lat muscle. That's a big deal. When you start to understand a little bit of that, and again, I'm a simple guy, so it may sound like I got all these big words and all this, that I've memorized a lot of stuff that it may helps me along the way with patients, but it's not that hard. So back to it, it's like, when you start to kind of throw out that and you have some confidence and certainty, and patients don't question it. And when you do, I'm like, thank you, because you're speaking my language. You're right. I'm like, let me tell you exactly. What do you need? I'll tell you. Let me find it for you. So.
Awesome. Well, I got to tell you, I'm super excited for the training that's coming up. I know it's power packed, full of information and just practice changing research and science. But before we get there, I have to say probably my favorite thing I've learned from you. If you remember, I asked you, it's been a while back, but it was, what does the research say about how many times I should see a patient? Should it be 3 times a week? Should it be 3 times a week for 6 weeks or 8 weeks? I know a lot of chiropractors out there, especially when you first get out of school, you battle with that, trying to figure it out. And that you told me that there's actually research that shows there is not a time that the chiropractic wasn't beneficial. So share with us that, and I think chiropractors will find that really valuable.
You're talking about the study that showed that there was no maximum improvement?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go a different direction. We didn't, we kind of, talked about the questions here. Some of them, and I thought about, I thought the question you're going to ask is about care plan, which is another one that we talked about, I think on the second video or
right
video maybe, which was care plans. Like how can I have certainty with my care plans? And I know we talked about that, but yeah, there was a study, it was the blank study. And the study actually showed that there was it was the largest study ever done in chiropractic. And it showed that there was there was a lot of things that they did. They showed lifestyle, quality of life, and all these things. But here was the greatest part of the study, is there was no maximum benefit. Meaning, as they measured them, and I think they followed them for 7 years. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was 7 years. There was no maximum improvement. What that means is the greatest part about chiropractic, People say, once you go, you got to keep going. Listen, that's the greatest part of chiropractic. Now, I'm going to walk you through that. And I don't tell you that on day one, because I know that's like a skeptic's word. Oh, I don't want to go because you got to keep going. Listen, it's a choice. Everybody that comes in here for life, that's a choice. You can stop anytime. Believe me, there's nothing holding you backward. But at the same time, is when I educate you the right way, and I show you the evidence, and I more importantly teach you the importance of your spine and the roles and its role in your health. And now I can back it up with awesome research that shows the best thing is that you actually, there's never a time when you're going to peak. So I've been getting adjusted, just thinking about this. It's probably 6 weeks ago. I was thinking about that. I'm like, we take it for granted. I've been getting adjusted, regularly since I started chiropractic college. And that was since I was, so it's like 15 years. My wife's been getting adjusted for like 8 years. And like between us, we never had a drug. Like, and it's weird. Like, and it's not like purposefully like, oh, I'm never taking a drug because I've never seen, the last drug I ever taken my body is when I got my wisdom teeth pulled and I was like 18 years old. And I thought about that. I'm like, man, we just forget. And I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the point is like, that's what, there's a time and a place for that. But when we understand again, and it's cool, like this is what I want us to start communicating with from a chiropractic profession standpoint. Like, we got to lead with the science, the philosophy. That's the greatest doctors within. We have to lead with the philosophy. We have to lead with that's our bread and butter. I mean, that's the bread. Let me remind everybody on the line. This is how crazy the power of the body is, and you forget this, and I'm going to remind you of this. But do you know when two women, you probably have 2 CAs. If you have 2 female CAs, eventually what's going to happen, because they're working side by side, Tabor, if you had 2 CAs working at your front desk for, I don't know, months and months of time, what eventually happens to those females, just like personally?
Oh, they sync.
Yeah, they sync up. So they're on their cycle, their menstrual cycle. Like, think about this. Like, I'm not letting you off the hook on this. This has been my topic in the last 6 weeks. So pheromones, those pheromones somehow connect, and then you get on the same cycle. It's just like a cell phone, man. There's right? Wirelessly, there's nothing. Right? So listen, I know you're kind of, people, you're laughing. It's like, yeah, that's it. But I need you to think about this. So don't ever consider yourself inferior because you lead with the philosophy of chiropractic, because we have answers that they don't even think about. We have answers because we say this. That same power that allows that to happen, that same power that when a mother's breastfeeding would change the milk from the receptors and the suckling of the baby, it would change the milk from the inside out based on the needs of that baby right then, because the saliva and the receptors on the nipple, like that right there is the power. That power we remove interference to. When we recognize how amazing that power is, then we recognize that we remove interference to that. And then the cool part is that the evidence backs up when we do remove interference, what truly are those effects. The other study that we always talk about is, 85% less pharmaceutical costs. They took two groups of people. One saw MDs as their primary care. One saw chiropractors, and considered chiropractors as their primary care. It was published in 2007. Over 750 people, 8 years. They followed them 8 years. And they showed that the people that considered their chiropractor as their primary care provider had 85% less pharmaceutical costs. Think about how that could change the entire fabric of our society if we're going around, even if 50%, 40% less, pharmaceutical costs, let alone they had 60% less surgery, 62% less hospital days, and all that. So the evidence is on our side. So no longer when I take, any chiropractor, I can teach them and say, listen, you don't have to lead with believe me. You can lead with some of the greatest evidence is on our side, and the greatest evidence, and I want to help show you, a great healthcare, system, and more importantly, what we're going to be looking for, vertebral subluxation, how the evidence of the world backs, or the best evidence of the world backs up what we do in this office.
Awesome. So before we close with the questions that people have, here at Chiro Thought Leaders, we teamed up with Dr. Dan Sullivan to bring you some of the best science and some of the most effective research that's out there today. And I'm excited for the next two trainings that we're going to be releasing. They're just full of information that's going to build your certainty. And then even more excited for after that, when we actually get to launch and give you the full Bulletproof Certainty program. So before we get to the questions, Dr. Dan, let's lead into what's the next training? What can they expect? By the way, everybody, keep an eye on your inbox for that in the next couple of days, and we'll be releasing it.
Well, what we go into on the next video, particularly, is this thing called the neurospinal organ, that what I went through, and the specific studies that back up what they have. For instance, when a child is adjusted, why does it calm their nervous system, right? There's the sympathetic dominant state, that fight or flight. We can't be in growth and repair when our body's subluxated because of what it does to the sympathetic nervous system via layer 7 of the spinal cord and those abnormal spinal mechanics. So we go in through, and again, I don't mean it I hate to get too heady. And that's one of my main, that's my niche. That's my thing. That's I'm just really, really striving to make it make sense to anybody. I'm a simple guy. I need it in third grade form. That's why I love to educate 10-year-olds, because I've kind of felt like I'm one of them. So if some of this seems it's overwhelming, listen, it's not. We break it down in the next two videos. The next video, we talk about the neurospinal organ, and then the next video is all the evidence, all the science, literally study after study after study, showing you, here's the evidence, here's what supports it. Why can somebody adjust an atlas and they get pregnant? That can't be from a bone out of place, put pressure on a nerve. Think about that. It's not even close to the Merrick chart. The Merrick chart is down here. So I explain exactly why, with the greatest science, and again, evidence to support that. Things that I can take. Things that I used last month when I went in a medical doctor's office and trained them, taught a bunch of MDs, and the response was unreal. That same evidence you're going to see in the next two videos.
Absolutely. So everybody stay tuned for those videos. Like I said, watch your inbox within the next day or two. You'll have that email as well. You'll be able to access those training videos, get even more science, more research, and more certainty in your life. So Dr. Dan, I'm going to go ahead and read this question that we have here, and I'll let you answer that. This is from Janaea. Because medical doctors often treat specific symptoms, it's easy to measure their success and easy for patients to attribute any relief or improvements to their intervention. With chiropractic, it's more challenging to target a specific area and claim what the results will be. Because of this, oftentimes people under chiro care make improvements that they don't actually attribute to the adjustment. Do you have any suggestions on how to encourage doctors and patients alike to make those connections and to get people attributing their progress, great and small, to the chiropractic care they're receiving?
That's a great question. My first kind of spitball response on that, what came to me, is awareness. And I learned this, Dr. Jim Temple talks about this a lot, awareness, making sure like those re-exams, not only, legally we do them and maybe educationally to do them for us and to make sure they're getting our big picture, but making sure they're aware of of their body and the changes they're going through, because you're dead on. You're absolutely right. It's so hard. That's why, again, I created the poster to say, you can look at this every time to come in. Look at all this neurology that's happening to the brain and to your, the sympathetic chain ganglia, right? But if you can actually make sure, so the first thing on my first visit, the first adjustment, I don't adjust the first visit, but the first adjustment, The first adjustment, I always tell every patient, listen, the top 4 responses, and I know this through neurology a little bit and just through experiences and results in the office, the top 4 things our patients notice after a first adjustment. Number 1, you're going to sleep better. Number 2, you're going to notice breathing better. Number 3, you're going to notice digestion better, and you're going to notice increased energy. Now, you may be a little sore because we're actually changing tissue that has been in a certain position for in place in a long time. But those 4 things I want you to be aware of. And sure enough, right? Because if they're, sometimes it is so subtle, but if they know that to look out for that, they're like, you know what, doc, I haven't slept this good. And how many times do you hear that? How many times, I haven't slept this good in how many years? And you start to, and this is where, again, understanding and being certain about the consequences of subluxation and the benefits of adjustment becomes absolutely critical, because you could speak into their lives. You're not telling them this is going to heal and that's going to heal and this is going to heal. But I know from a physiological standpoint, when we remove interference, that brain is going to calm the body. You're going to be set, the stage is set for you to increase those or decrease those stress hormones, sleep, digestion, breathing, and energy beyond a shadow of a doubt. So great thing, be more aware. Get your patients to be more aware and you lead them.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Being able to say, look, this doesn't always happen, but watch out for this, this, and this. And then when that does happen, obviously, because you said it, they're going to tie that back to the adjustment.
Well, listen, and it's not just, this doesn't always happen, but it's this. The majority of our patients experience and report this after their first adjustment. And there's absolute efficacy, and there's science, and the best literature in the world supports why that happens, because we're actually removing interference, we're calming the nervous system. This is something, again, according to their history and their, their x-rays and their exam and whatever findings you use, it's like, there's no question you got subluxation, and there's no question in my mind that you will have some of these, if not all, or it's happening. You may not notice it, but it absolutely will happen. And then sure enough, come next day, oh man, I slept it. So be aware and speak into their life.
Well, you're speaking with certainty there, and you're certain that's going to happen because of the science, the research, the experience, and that's exactly what we're building in this training series. And for everybody who's on here.
Hey, Tabor, let me close with this one thing, and then you can, I take it from here if there wasn't any other question. Was there any questions?
There was just one. Kelly wants to know if you have links to the Renser autopsy. The actual study.
You could go to my website, chiropracticadvocate.com, and it's on there. It's on the, you can find it there. But here's the thing. I forgot to tell you, I had this written down. If you want to talk about how certainty is money in your bank, how certainty is influence in your town, how certainty is literally, the game changer, because it's not a better script. It's not a better, talk or better report. It's what's coming out of you, but what's on set. You want to know this? In today's world, America, United States of America, where's this more evident? Look at what Donald Trump is doing. Here's a guy that's abrasive. He's brash. He's like, everything that's non-political, but yet he skyrockets in the polls because he's authentic. He's authentic. We are so attracted to somebody that's authentic. Like, just tell me the truth. Like, tell me what you really feel. Tell me, we're sick of the political answers. And that's what, I'm all for scripts if they come from the right place. But listen, certainty allows you to be authentic, right? Certainty allows you to be authentic. And that's why we get so excited about
Absolutely.
what this can do, what these videos can do, what certainty can do for you, and everything from there.
Absolutely, 100%. And we have some great comments. I think we're done with questions. Bob Pike had posted a great comment on there, so everybody can read through the comments. Feel free to speak and talk and interact on that comment section below this video. But I just want to thank everyone for being on tonight, and thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself, to build certainty so that you can touch more people, reach more people, and not just grow your practice, but just share this truth that's going to change people's lives in your community. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you on the next video, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night.